Where we start your show this morning. An emotional day it was for Brendan Banfield on Wednesday. He was wiping away tears as the jury saw body camera footage from the day that his wife was killed. Look at this. And then we heard an officer on the video talking about the news, the awful news. Let's go back to that very moment.
Your wife has died. So sorry.
The defense also called Detective Brendan Miller about being reassigned. This was after he analyzed devices linked to Banfield's wife, Christine. He testified his findings didn't change even after he heard the au pair admitting that she and the defendant created accounts to lure a victim and frame that victim for Christine Banfield's murder. So, how's the defense doing so far? What do you think? And what do you think needs to happen today? Let's bring in our guest analyst I'm so pleased to have on the show this morning, Chief Chris Anderson and Attorney John Phillips. Good morning to you both. Chief, I'll start with you. There was a lot of focus on that detective and how he thought that it was Christine Banfield using the devices. Christine Banfield, who would have created these accounts, he didn't find that there would have been any time where she was not in control of them. However, we have the au pair saying that this was by design, that Brendan Banfield was smart enough to know that at some point, great investigators would be looking at his moves and know if Christine's cell phone was pinging off somewhere else, but yet the laptop was gone in the house. So, Chief, how do you handle this when you're on the side of the Commonwealth and the investigators who believe they got the right guy here?
So your whole objective is to really, talk about the truth. You have to be honest in every point of your investigation. I mean, if there's something that may suggest that this person may be innocent, you're still required by law to divulge that information. So, you have to handle it like any other investigation you would do. You definitely don't try to hide anything, but you have to release it. It has to be stated.
Mm-hmm. Right, Chief. Yeah, you have to put it out there. Everything good, bad, sideways, turn it all over when you're the government. You're right. So let me take a look at a clip with you both. This is that detective, and he's being questioned about Christine and her laptop use.
What were your conclusions in your executive summary that you wrote before her recant?
That based on the digital evidence I had at the time and the facts known at the time, it indicated that the device owner was responsible for the activity on the device.
And that device owner?
Christine Banfield.
But throughout the context of all of the conversations that you saw occurring, the activity that you saw occurring on Christine's phone, could you conclusively opine as to who was behind the screen?
No.
Okay, did the Commonwealth do it there? John Phillips, what do you say?
There's a lot to unpack here that I don't know. Now, what I'm not going to do as an armchair detective for purposes of this is get on FetLife or whatever the website was, because it may be used against me one day. But there's so many different ways, from like DuckDuckGo to IP VPN, alteration, to kind of bounce things differently and change how you can forensically determine who was on what site, what IP address was linked. But again, you got to go back to whether or not the wife was ever on FetLife. The stuff about the knife, and like, this isn't something that she'd be allow in her life is key. And then it all again comes down to the credibility of the au pair. Do you believe she is this good of a liar? But it's certainly where reasonable doubt lives. And we've seen it way back, even before Mark Furman, that you find the weak link in the detective chain and the chain of custody, and you attack it.
Right, the defense team just doing its job here. John, I'm glad you brought up the knife. Chief Anderson, been wanting to ask you, harken back to all your years of working homicide cases. You were a homicide detective for many years before becoming chief of police. And here we know that Brendan Banfield's DNA was not on the knife. We know there were no injuries to his hand or both hands. Is that dispositive? Have you ever seen cases where somebody does a violent murder with a knife and walks away unscathed and doesn't manage to put their DNA on the weapon?
Yeah, so it has happened before. I've seen it where you have a very violent murder like you described, and then the victim in that case has walked away unscathed. I'm sorry, not the victim, but the suspect in that case has walked away unscathed. It's not unheard of. Is it rare? Yeah. In some cases it is rare, but you have to look at the totality of the circumstances in any case that you investigate. You can't just, and I know you're not doing this, but most of us armchair investigators now will look at that as, that I got your moment. And that's not necessarily the case.
Right, Chief. I want to ask you a follow-up question on that, please. We know the way this went down. Initially, nobody was arrested. Initially, it seemed that everybody at the scene was believing that this was a situation like Brendan Banfield and the au pair described, where this intruder comes in, they don't know what's happening, he's the hero, it's put to bed. But then, as investigators kept taking a closer look, and who knows if there were any tips that came, who knows, what was done behind the scenes, we're not privy to all of it. But we know that they first arrested her, and about a year went by where she was sitting in the jail, and then they arrest him when it's very clear that she's going to cooperate and give him up for what she says was his masterminded plot. Chief, practically speaking, how often does this happen that, investigators might look at something on its face and think one thing, and then once you get a little more information and the team becomes more informed, a different decision is made?
Yeah, so it happens more often than what we realize. I've had multiple cases where in the beginning it looked one way, but we as homicide investigators, you can't look at just the surface and then make a determination. That's why you are in homicide. You have to have certain characteristics interwoven in your DNA, not to just look at the surface and make a complete determination, because that's where justice fails. So I've had multiple cases where I've began to work on the cases and it looked one way, but after you chip away at each portion of the case, sometimes they start taking a different direction. And once you get to the end, that's where you find where it wasn't the way that you initially thought during the initial stages of the investigations, but that's just a part of an investigator or a homicide investigator's DNA.
Right. I appreciate you talking to us about what's real, Chief. We all love the shows that are done in an hour where the crime happens, it's solved, and, it's quick and easy. But in real life, things can be painstakingly difficult. Chief Chris Anderson, we have to let you go. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. We'll see you soon. John Phillips is coming with us. You do the same at home. Please, when we come back, here's what we've got.